The war going on right now in Israel between Hamas and the Israeli Defense Force is terrible, and it's a horrible situation. I don't think anybody has any question about that. It's one of the worst wars that we've seen in a long time. Certainly in the Middle East, it probably does go all the way back to the 1973 Yom Kippur War in its barbarity and its scope. In some ways, although it's a slightly smaller scale than the one in Russia and Ukraine, it's in some ways much more barbaric because the civilian populations are both like targeted by the other side, and they're suffering on all sides. It's just terrible. It is in America's vital national interest to prevent this war from spreading beyond the borders of Gaza, and certainly to keep it contained within Israel. The last thing that we need is to get into a new war, whether by intention, by design, or by error and mistake and miscalculation. And that should be self-evident. It should be an obvious statement that it's in America's interest to keep the war from expanding, or so you would think. But unfortunately, one former American official and one current member of Congress don't seem to be very clear on this, or more to the point, they seem to be oblivious as to the consequences for suggested action. We're going to go back just a few days, and first we're going to look at former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Fox News, who said this.
So the way you square this is to continue to put pressure on the primary actor, the world's largest state sponsor of terror, Iran. It's now the case that the Iranians have killed 9 Americans. It requires a response against Iran. You can't just keep taking out militias and knuckleheads in Iraq. You have to go at the heart of the beast, and that is the Iranian leadership. I spoke directly to Qasem Soleimani and to the Ayatollah when I was a CIA director and Secretary of State. We told them, you come after an American, we're coming not after your proxy forces, we're coming after the regime. We're coming after the leaders who have put this peril for America and for Israel. That's what this administration needs to do. I hope that they will. They've demonstrated, again, that appeasement with Iran, attempting to sort of balance Middle Eastern interests, ends up in the murder of 9 Americans and hundreds and hundreds of Israelis.
That's just nonsense. I mean, he is, first of all, directly stating, not implying, directly stating that Iran killed Americans. He said it straight up, word for word. That's what he said. That is completely fabricated. There's no truth to that whatsoever. This was an issue of Hamas in Israel, and there were Americans present, and so some of them have died because it's, there's people from all around the world in Israel. That's a terrible tragedy. But to say that Iran killed Americans, and now then to solve that problem, we have to go after the beast into the heart of their lair in Tehran and go after their leadership. That is insane. That is nonsense, because what you're going to do then is going to expand the war, and you're going to drag the United States, get us plunged into another Middle Eastern war after we finally got out of Afghanistan, and we still have troops in Syria and in Iraq, and you want to draw us into another one. Is there any doubt in anyone's mind, and maybe there is, perhaps that Pompeo is confused on something, or perhaps he's just ignorant, that he thinks, I think he actually believes that if we go in there and take out the leadership of Iran, i.e. kill them, that somehow that the rest of the regime is just going to, droop their shoulders and say, okay, sorry, I guess we'll stop now. I mean, is he insane? Does he not understand anything about the Middle East? Look, the only reason that Iran didn't respond in very strong measure after we killed one of their generals, Qasem Soleimani, that he's talking about there, they actually did come after us. And by the way, they fired a lot of missiles at an American base in Iraq, and 100 Americans were wounded. Thank God none were killed. It was by sheer luck that we got lucky that none were killed, because if there had been, then President Trump would have been forced to respond as well, and then we could have gotten into a war in that time. Now, then you go and you actually take out the leadership, or even attempt to. What do you think that Iran's going to do then? You're going to unleash Hezbollah. They're going to unleash all of their proxies in the region. They're going to actually attack probably our troops in both Iraq and Syria, anywhere they can, maybe ships in the Gulf. I mean, they can absolutely set the place on fire. Now, why in the world would you want to advocate that as a solution to something that didn't even happen? You want to take what's a bad situation in Israel and turn it into a conflagration. Now, unfortunately, Pompeo wasn't the only one guilty of this. Also, on the same day, in a different part of the country, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham added this.
I talked to the Israelis today. Clearly, Iran's behind this. I think it's now time for us to consider with our friends in Israel to hit Iran's oil economy. If there's an escalation of this war, I am urging the Biden administration and the Israelis to jointly come up with a plan to destroy Iran's oil infrastructure. Without oil, they have no money. Without money, the terrorism loses its biggest benefactor.
Okay, perfect opportunity here for a little bit of 101 American Constitution lesson. The United States military does not exist so that whoever wants to use it can go and throw some missiles around here and blow this thing up and execute that foreign leader because we don't like them, because they did something we don't like. That's not what the U.S. Armed Forces is for. The U.S. Constitution says that only the American Congress has the ability, the authority to wage war. The only time the president can use his War Powers Act is if the United States has been directly attacked by an enemy, or if an attack is imminent on the United States, our allies, or our armed forces. That's it. It's not because in somebody else's war there were some Americans caught in the crossfire. It's not because, well, I think, and you hear Lynn that, there's no doubt in my mind. There should be a lot of doubt because he has no idea. He just knows what someone said. But because he heard that they were, we should now use military force and go in and destroy their civil infrastructure by which they get their revenue. And look, the Constitution doesn't give you the authority to do that. I don't care if Biden said, sure, Lindsey, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. He doesn't have the authority to do that unless Congress declares war, and certainly no one would do so under these circumstances. You can't do that. So that's not even an option. That's not when you have these senior officials given that kind of suggestion. First of all, it's like they don't even know or care, and maybe they do know and just don't care what the actual Constitution that they claim to want to defend actually says. And they don't understand what the purpose of the armed forces is. And a part of that's understandable only because it's been so badly perverted and misused over the last several decades that now we just consider it as a common instrument of policy. If we can get what we want by talking, we'll get it. If we can't, then we'll use military force, because the issue is we get what we want. Not that we want to defend ourselves, but that we want to use force to just compel compliance with others, and we'll just kill them if they don't do what we want. I mean, that's a crude way to put it, but unfortunately, that's the reality what these men are suggesting. You got to call it what it is. That's what they're suggesting. We'll kill people if they don't do what we want to do so that we get the policy outcomes we prefer. That is immoral. It's unethical. It's un-American. It's un-American. We do not exist to go and compel people to do what we want just because we say so. We have a strong armed forces, and I am a strong advocate of a strong national defense. I served 21 years in the service. I fought in 4 combat deployments. I did not hesitate to engage in direct fire against our enemies, and I would not do so again if we were attacked in the future. But I did not join up into service to put my life on the line, or to join with any of my colleagues or other fellow service members to go and kill somebody else because you don't like them. That's not what we exist for. We risk our lives, and everybody in uniform today signed up voluntarily knowing that they could put their lives on the line in the defense of America, not in the pursuance of your policy objectives when there is no threat to the United States. And right now, Iran is very much deterred from attacking the United States because they know that the power imbalance between the two is off the charts. If they actually initiated any unprovoked attack against the United States, they know for sure that they would be hammered, that they would be crushed, because they don't have the power to go toe-to-toe with us in any capacity. However, if you go in there and you attack Iran, they're not going to just lay down and take it. They will respond almost certainly, especially if you're talking about something like destroy their oil infrastructure or assassinate their leaders. They're not going to be passive. They're not going to roll over. I don't know what anybody's thinking. So it's not going to work, as well as being unethical, immoral, and illegal. So let's get that off the table. But man, look, it is time for Americans to start standing up and saying, hey, stop talking this kind of nonsense. It's like there's this group of people, this echelon of the elite society that wants to drag us into wars everywhere. I mean, their first thought is, yes, let's go kill somebody. Let's go throw some missiles here and there. I mean, I'm tired of that. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm tired of that kind of mentality. I want to see us get back to doing something that makes sense, something that has a chance to succeed, something that has a chance to actually protect American national security and advance our economic security interests. That's what I want to see. That means let's have some more diplomacy. Let's have some more intelligence, some wisdom, strategic patience on things. Now, that, let me just tell you, that doesn't mean we get what we want right now and that we always get everything that we want. Doing this means that sometimes we don't get it the way we want. We don't get the outcomes we prefer. That's just part of doing business. You can't negotiate anything. I mean, even American business, you don't negotiate any kind of a deal and get everything that you want. Nobody does that. But yet on the international stage, you have people in Washington that want to get 100% their way, 0% the other way. And if they don't get it, they're ready to use other means. I'm saying that that is self-destructive, that it's already cost us so much in these other wars of choice that we never needed to fight recently. Our troops in Syria today are not doing anything for American national security. Our troops are at risk, their lives every day, for no risk to our national security. They should be removed. The troops in Iraq right now are helping Baghdad. They are there to help that country stay stable for their benefit, not for ours. Our troops are there at risk. And now then, if Iran ever does want to do anything to the United States, there's a ready-made target right there within easy range, and they know right where our troops are. That's foolish for us to have that troops there. But let's don't get dragged into another war because of our hubris and arrogance, and we just want to tell everybody what they're going to do. This war in Israel right now is a horrible situation. It's terrible for Israel. It's terrible for the Palestinian civilians that are caught in the crossfire. We need to do everything we can to keep that contained. Don't let it escalate into Lebanon. Don't let it escalate with Iran. Let's get everything tamped down. And I don't even know how that's going to happen in the near term because emotions are so high, because the death toll has been so high. The brutality has been so egregious. So it's going to be hard as it is to keep this contained. Let's don't add to the problems and make it even worse by advocating for policy solutions that had no chance to succeed and a lot of chance to escalate this and get us drawn into a war we should never fight. So a little bit hot on that today because I don't want to see any more Americans get killed. I don't want to see us get into any more wars unnecessarily, especially if they're by our choice and have nothing to do with our national security. That's your deep dive for today.